Thank you guys for joining me today. In this video, I'm going to discuss a punctuation mark, which you probably recognize. It's on screen. It's called the semicolon. It appears pretty often in academic journals and news articles, and in some conventional writing, although it's a bit more rare as far as general use among friends or family when writing to each other. However, it's still a really important punctuation mark to know, to familiarize yourself with, and to use yourself, because personally, I mean, the fact is it is pretty rare to see in common parlance, I guess. And so when it is noticed, or excuse me, when it is seen in writing, whether it's an email or some other source, people do notice, and I believe it gives a good impression because it elevates your writing, or at least it implies that you seem to have a really strong knowledge base in terms of English and its use, and so it speaks very well to you. So that's kind of why I wanted to introduce it, hopefully to see it used more often. I overuse it, but I love it, so let's talk about it. All right, so let me scroll through just to kind of talk about what a semicolon is and when we would use it. Oops. Okay, so when would we use it? Simply put, you're going to use a semicolon to join what are known as two independent clauses together. So it links them together. And as a reminder, an independent clause is, it's got its own subject and it's got its own verb, right? And it's a complete thought or idea that can live independent. So it's essentially its own sentence. It's its own idea. There's a lot of different ways to frame it. That can live on its own. However, if you have one sentence with two independent clauses that are similarly aligned in terms of what it is that they're saying, then you can join them together using a semicolon. Now, oftentimes I've had students say, well, wouldn't you just separate the first clause, the first independent clause, from the next independent clause, even though they're similar, but couldn't you join them, per se, by just ending the first clause with a period and then beginning the next clause? You could, however, and that is really the most common way that you've seen people break up their ideas or their clauses in a paragraph or whatever. However, the idea of a period is to end a thought and separate it from another, whereas a semicolon will join two thoughts that are, again, aligned with one another, right? They're either on the same topic or they're discussing the same situation or whatever the case may be. And because of their relationship, you wouldn't want to separate them using a period. Instead, you'd want to break up your sentence, because perhaps it's getting a little lengthy, and divide that sentence using a semicolon. And I do give an example, which you should see on screen, where it said, oh, he couldn't taste the food. Right? So that's my independent clause. I got my subject. Well, what couldn't he do? He couldn't taste the food. But then I continue that idea with the second independent clause, which is his sinus infection impacted his ability to taste. And as a reminder, a sinus is the passage between the nose towards the esophagus. Your smell receptors and your taste receptors, smell and taste are essentially the same thing. They're linked. But anywho, that's a different topic. So again, the ideas are very much the same, right? It's kind of a cause and effect situation that I've got going on here, where at the beginning, we know he couldn't taste his food. And then I give the reasoning for that in the second part. I wouldn't separate it, right, with a period, right? So he couldn't taste his food, period. His sinus infection impacted his ability to taste. The meaning doesn't change if I decide to use a period instead of a semicolon. However, because the thoughts are so unified, it makes more sense to link them using a semicolon. So while it divides the sentence, it's still linking the ideas. And I have my cat, Mr. Chunks, who's now joining us. That's right. All right. Mr. Chunks is now going to go find a bird to eat while I continue. Let's take a look. So talking a little bit more about joining those two independent clauses, those independent clauses are often joined using what's called a conjunction, right? So in this case, I've got conjunction adverbs, conjunctive adverbs. Why is my screen flashing? Oh, there we go. Sorry, it just disappeared for a moment. The example I give is Stephen dropped the weights, right? So I'm in the weight room and I dropped the weights. As a result, would be the conjunctive adverb because it's linking by suggesting what comes next in that sentence. So as a result, it fell with a loud bang, right? So it continues that initial thought, broken up with the semicolon while still linked to that second clause, and continued forward with that adverb conjunctive, the conjunctive adverb. And there's a lot of examples of that, like for instance, furthermore, in addition to, next, and so forth. Those are all conjunctive adverbs. And if you remember a conjunction, like and, but, or, they link two parts of a sentence together, or two ideas together, in a single sentence. Okay, so let's continue. Oh, this one's a good one actually, and this is one that I don't see used often enough in writing. So with my students, generally younger, so they get a bit of an excuse, but even among adults, I noticed that when compiling a list, where you are listing multiple things, or you're creating a series, right? And you would like to elaborate further on a part or an item that you've listed in this series, which requires a comma, right? So in the example I give, sorry about this, I have to scroll. So in this world, you meet two kinds of people. And now I'm going to set the stage for a series or a list, right? So some who work hard, comma, and see after this comma, I'm not adding to the list, but instead I'm elaborating on what I had just listed, which is some who work hard, right? That's the first part of our list. And my elaboration is, which is admirable. So I'm saying more about it. However, I'm not going to continue the list with the comma, which is what you would expect when you're generating a list or a series, right? You separate each item by a comma. Except in this example, I've given you an item to the list, elaborated on it, right, with the comma, but I'm going to continue the list. So now I have to break it up using a semicolon. And this could be, which I do in this case, right? Or those who do the bare minimum, comma, a sad way to live. So again, I'm elaborating further on that next part of the series. And this could be done for anything in a list. Like I went to the store to buy ketchup, comma, which is made from old tomatoes, semicolon. So now I've broken that up. I should probably type this in. So I bought ketchup, which is made from old tomatoes. Oops, I can spell, guys, I swear. And then I'm going to continue, right? Cabbage, which, let's see, lettuce, my favorite. Oops, gosh, spelling today. All right. Lastly, I bought oranges. Right? So you can see that I'm still writing this list and I'm elaborating on a couple of those items, not necessarily each one, but as I'm continuing, I do need to separate each of those by or with a semicolon after the elaboration. Mr. Chunks again. All right, go. Sorry. Very hot in my garage, cats roaming around, trying to be professional. Okay, so for this one, it's similar to what we had just talked about, except we're not referring to a list. We're instead talking about joining two independent clauses, so two sentences that can live independent of each other, right? They could end with a period and be just fine, but we're not. We're going to keep them together without punctuating it with a period. So anywho, they're joined using a coordinating conjunction. And coordinating conjunctions are just a fancy way of saying a conjunction. And again, a conjunction, like the examples and, but, or, are linking two parts of the sentence together. Okay? Not like a conditional per se, but it's just two ideas or two clauses joined together using a conjunction. And I gave you some examples like for, and, not, but, and so on. Let's see. Oops. Joined using coordinating conjunction is already punctuated with commas. Oh, okay. My screen flashes twice. I'm not sure if it's showing up. So anyway, and yeah, again, the coordinating conjunctions in this case are going to be separated by a comma. So you wouldn't just throw them in there. You'd want to break the sentence up just to generate a more natural feel to it. So let's go ahead and look at the example that I provided. So some people choose to live their lives working hard, comma. Now I'm giving that coordinating conjunction. Or going above and beyond. So I've got that coordinating conjunction wherein I elaborate the next part of that idea. I'm going to continue with the next, independent clause, but I've got to separate it using a semicolon. And I say separate, but really what I mean is I'm linking them, right? So I'm dividing the two physically by marking it with the semicolon, but I'm not punctuating it by with a period, which would end and divide. I'm linking them together, okie doke, but it's still a physical separator, like a barrier. But others would rather choose the easiest way out. So then again, I've got another coordinating conjunction, which is but, which follows the semicolon. So that's another example. Let me go ahead and scroll to, oh, no, that's it, that's right, good for me. So, all right, looking again at a semicolon, physically you see it here. It is different than a colon, right, which usually denotes something afterwards like a list. Instead, this is used to link two independent clauses, which we also discussed. Let's see. And I do want to emphasize the fact that when you're using semicolons, it's good not to overgeneralize. So let's say you've got two independent clauses that, again, you want to join together because you feel like they're similar in thought. You want to be mindful of how similar or how closely related the two sentences are to warrant the use of a semicolon, right? So you could say, for instance, in the sentences, I like oranges, oranges are a fruit. You could link those two using a semicolon because it's still referring to the same thing, right? But it would be more apt to use a semicolon in like an elaborative context, like same sentence, I like oranges, or oranges, comma, or semicolon. I use them to make orange juice often, right? So now I'm expanding a little bit more on those oranges as opposed to just sharing some arbitrary fact about what an orange is. Again, it would be perfectly fine to use a semicolon in that situation, but I think for native speakers, when reading that, it would, at least for us, for me, speaking for myself only, I feel like it would be unnecessary. Not everyone though, so that's just from my perspective. All right, again, I'm gonna run through the list of when to use a semicolon. You're gonna use them to link two independent clauses, again, using conjunctive adverbs, like in addition to or next, kind of framing a sequence or a cause and effect. Same thing, so when you, or not same thing, excuse me. You're going to use them when you are elaborating or providing an additional detail within a list, and you want to continue that list, but you want to break it up. So you would use a semicolon when adding to the next item after you had previously just elaborated on the item before. Excuse me. I'm going kind of fast. Also, again, linking those two independent clauses using a coordinating conjunction. So just think of a standard conjunction like and, but, or, linking two ideas together. And I believe that is it. Alrighty. If you have any additional insights or suggestions, whether it's about content you'd like me to produce, please leave it in the comment or send me a message. I'm totally open to feedback, and I would really, really appreciate it, actually. In addition to that, if you could subscribe and perhaps also like the video if it was worthwhile to you, I would appreciate it. It does help me expand my reach. That being said, I will also link this document, the one that you've seen in the video, below in the description so you can have access to it. I do encourage everyone to take notes, create flashcards. It'll really help with your independent practice offline. And I also encourage you to identify semicolons in a sentence and determine what is helping to, or why it's being used. Like, what is it being bridged to the, how is it being used to bridge two independent clauses, right? Is it using a coordinating conjunction? Is it using a general standard conjunction? Is it elaborating on a list, and so on? So, all right, thank you for joining me, and I look forward to the next one. Bye. As my cat screams. Ooh.